Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me today for the next discussion in the True Path Thrive Tuesday series. Today, we'll explore how to move from overwhelm to action and the cost of procrastination. There's nothing that you need to prepare for. All that's required is curiosity. Take a moment to arrive fully wherever you're listening from, and let's begin the discussion. If we not met before, I'm Tara Palazzolo, the founder of True Path CO and the creator of the True Path Framework. I do not approach personal growth as a matter of discipline or simply fixing habits. Over time, I began to see that many of the struggles that people blame themselves for are actually the result of operating inside systems, such as corporate structures and social constructs that were never designed to support the human system. My perspective has been shaped by years of functioning inside high-performance environments where self-abandonment is normalized, incentivized, and often mistaken for resilience. My work focuses on replacing shame with design thinking, asking what is not wrong, but what is missing. I help people develop language for their internal experience so they can trust themselves again, especially in moments where they've learned to override their own intuition. One of the core assumptions in my work is simple. Lack of exposure is not lack of capability. When people are given the right context, structure, and support, aligned action becomes possible, not through force, but through clarity. This perspective is part of the True Path Framework. Before we talk about taking action, we need to understand where we're standing. I want to invite you to perform a systems check and notice where is procrastination present right now in your life. We're seeking information at this stage, like a research project, not looking to jump to conclusions or judgment or begin problem solving. If you need more time to explore this question further, I urge you to pause this learning and continue when you're ready. When people pause with this question, certain patterns tend to surface, like avoiding decisions, also waiting for clarity before moving, overthinking next steps, starting, stopping, and circling back. This is a pattern I know intimately as a writer. I create, edit, pause, return, and edit again, feeling busy, yet not actually progressing. We're not going to try and fix all of these. We're going to try to learn how to read them. Procrastination is the presence of strain. More specifically, it's a response to internal friction, overload, or misalignment within the human system. It tells us something that needs support, clarity, or restructuring before movement can resume. For many people, it's a signal of overwhelm. The system has simply taken on too much and can't prioritize. Sometimes it's a pause that shows up when capacity has been exceeded, even when the desire to move is present. Sometimes it's a response to decisions that feel unclear, emotionally loaded, or even high stakes. In many cases, what looks like procrastination is actually self-protection. I also want to debunk a myth out there that I've even fallen into, is I work better under pressure. I've said this to people and know many other people that have said this to me. Some examples are pulling an all-nighter to write a college paper, cleaning frantically before somebody arrives, be it parents, landlords, or guests. When somebody delays until the last minute and then pushes through, urgency activates stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. Focus narrows because the system's in threat mode. Once the task is complete, the nervous system releases dopamine and relief chemicals. So the reward is not for aligned action or the work. It's for the ending the discomfort and surviving the real strain. I also want to emphasize that relief is not the same as sustainability. This can quickly become a repeating pattern because the system learns I can function under pressure. I get a payoff when danger's over. But there's hidden costs of this that we'll cover soon. The bottom line is when we stop fighting procrastination and start listening to it, action becomes possible once again. Procrastination is often judged by what it looks like on the outside. We look at behavior and make assumptions about the character or effort. In reality, we are not talking about traits. Procrastination is better understood as a response to capacity and load, not a failure of will. It's not laziness. Many people who procrastinate care deeply about what they're trying to do. It's not a lack of discipline. In fact, many people who struggle with procrastination are highly disciplined in other areas of their life. It's not poor motivation. Often the desire is there. What's missing is clarity, energy, or support. And it's not weak boundaries. Pulling back or delaying can be the way the human system tries to limit further demand when capacity is already stretched. And it's definitely not a lack of care or structural support. Wanting to do something and having the tools to do it are not the same thing. When we talk about care and structural support, we're discussing emotional investment, intention and meaning, and access to the right tools, structure, and resources. When either is missing, behavior degrades, not because the person failed, but because the system support did. It's like having a computer with no backup system when the memory's full. When we label these behaviors as flaws, we miss an opportunity of what our nervous system is communicating and what we need. Understanding what procrastination is not an excuse for inaction. It explains it, and this compassionate perspective is what makes real movements possible again. Why procrastination compounds? When people are overwhelmed, the system does not shut down completely. It looks for something that it can do to reduce internal pressure. Think of it as something that seems productive to relieve pressure and guilt, much like a valve works. Internal pressure builds up, and then there's a control valve that prevents pressure from causing damage to the structure, but it's also not entirely effective. That's why we find ourselves doom scrolling, tidying, and avoiding everything we care about. That's why somebody sitting down to write a paper suddenly starts cleaning out the refrigerator. It wasn't on their task list. It's not even something that they usually feel motivated to do. But compared to the paper, cleaning the refrigerator feels contained and non-threatening. The definition of a success is clear and finite. A refrigerator can be emptied, wiped down, and completed. A midterm paper carries ambiguity, evaluation, and open-ended expectations. In this moment, the system chooses the task where success is visible, bounded, and achievable, especially when cognitive or emotional load is already high. This choice offers relief without risk. These are not random behaviors, they're low-threat, familiar actions that temporarily calm down our systems. The key takeaway is procrastination is what you notice, overwhelm is what's underneath, and avoidance is how the system tries to regulate. Procrastination is not the absence of effort. It's effort redirected to a different task. The cost of procrastination is rarely dramatic, and it can expand way further than just missed deadlines or visible failure. Energy gets spent managing pressure instead of creating clarity. Decisions linger longer than they need to, not because you're incapable, but because the system never gets the conditions to resolve them cleanly. Over time, something begins to erode trust in yourself. Each time the system is under-supported or rushed past its warning signals, it learns that alignment can be bypassed, and that lesson compounds over time. The cost of procrastination is not that nothing happens, it's that the right things stay untouched while the energy is quietly consumed elsewhere. Another cost that goes unnamed is emotional debt. When procrastination leads to asking for help at the last minute with money, cleaning, logistics, or emotional support, there's often relief. But along with that can also be guilt, shame, or a sense of obligation. Even when the support is given freely and lovingly, the system may internalize the experience as, I should have handled this myself. That feeling does not disappear when the task is done. It's carried forward. There's also a physical and mental impact. This is non-diagnostic, but it can show up as things like disturbed sleep, increased baseline stress, reduced access to creativity, a higher likelihood of burnout, experiences of anxiety or low mood. These are patterns I've noticed in myself and others that have shared with me over time. What matters here is not labeling, but recognizing the cost of sustained pressure. Eventually, the system may need more pressure to achieve the same level of focus because pressure became the primary access point to action, and that's costly. Eventually, procrastination requires a payment that's with unreasonable amount of interest. What often gets misunderstood is that alignment does not disappear when we procrastinate. It just becomes a whisper. When pressure rises, whether from time, expectations, emotional load, or perceived urgency, our system reprioritizes. Protection comes first, and clarity comes second. Urgency begins to distort what feels possible in the moment. What might normally feel manageable starts to feel overwhelming. Rest can feel unsafe. Pausing can feel irresponsible. Familiar depletion, staying busy, pushing through, or continuing to act can feel safer than unfamiliar risk or uncertainty. This is why procrastination often does not look like doing nothing, as I've covered in earlier examples. Action continues, but not in the direction of alignment. This is a protective trade-off that the system makes under pressure. The system chooses what helps it stay regulated in the present, not what helps it thrive later. And when this pattern repeats, alignment does not disappear. It simply stops interrupting as loud. To move from where you are to where you want to be requires a shift in perspective. So let's take a moment to look at the landscape differently. Moving from procrastination to aligned action is about shifting from regulation through avoidance to regulation through structure. When we talk about the protection procrastination pattern, action is still happening, but it's serving regulation, not resolution. Low risk or familiar actions replace meaningful movement. Signals are acknowledged but not integrated. That leads into energy is spent managing an internal pressure. The person adapts themselves to the environment. On the aligned side, action does not stop, it becomes more supported. Aligned action is guided by capacity, clarity, and sequencing. Small, defined steps reduce threat and friction. Signals are treated as data, not resistance. Energy is invested towards resolution, not relief. The environment is adjusted to support the person. This is why forcing action rarely works long term. When the conditions are right, action does not require force. It becomes the natural next step. You may recognize now that aligned actions support the human system. They're the kind of responses that become available when pressure has been reduced and clarity has returned, matching the current capacity, not ideal capacity. Aligned action starts from where you actually are, not where you think you should be. It honors what the system can hold today, not what can be handled on its best day. I want to pull this thread and unravel this a bit. Many of us plan our to-do list as if we'll wake up refreshed, focused, uninterrupted, with generous time for meals, movement, and even rest. That version of the day exists occasionally, but it's not the baseline reality. The everyday reality includes meetings that run over, children announcing last-minute school requests, and a washing machine that starts leaking. Most people don't reasonably plan for that version of the day. The human brain tends to overlook real data and instead design schedules around an idealized, perfect conditions scenario where everything aligns. That imagined day becomes the gold standard, and anything less feels like failure. It's not about discouraging aspiration, it's about grounding action in reality. When we plan only for our best possible days, we unintentionally create systems that require self-override on ordinary days. Aligned action works differently. It starts with what is actually available and builds from there. Move one meaningful step at a time. Rely on structure rather than urgency. Create momentum without depletion. When action is aligned, movement leaves the system more resourced, not more exhausted. Aligned action does not drain tomorrow to pay for today. Contrast that with the familiar pattern of pulling an all-nighter to finish a paper due at 8 a.m. The task gets completed, but at a cost. You skip multiple classes afterwards to recover, fall behind on new material, and spend the rest of the week trying to catch up. What looks like productivity in the moment creates a compounded strain over time. This is not forward movement, it's debt. Leave the system more resourced than before. This is one of the clearest outcomes. Aligned action does not cost you your nervous system, your creativity, or your self-trust. Think of aligned action like walking on a well-lit path instead of bushwhacking through thick brush. The effort is still yours, but the terrain is no longer working against you. Before we talk about specific tools or examples, I want to talk about support of infrastructure. We've identified that when people struggle with procrastination, the instinct's often to look for the fix, a better system, habit, or more discipline. Support is not an indulgence, my friends. It's what allows action to happen. Even though we are complex, multifaceted living systems, we still require resources to function. This is true whether we are 8 or 80. A car does not move without fuel or oil. A computer cannot run without processing power or memory, or even electricity. Humans are no different, especially in a complex, demanding world. And yet many of us have learned to treat the need for support as a flaw. We would never call a toddler who has not yet learned how to ride a bike a procrastinator. We understand that skill development requires time, support, safety, and appropriate conditions, not labels. We intuitively know that learning happens in stages. If a child struggles, we do not assume something is wrong with them. We adjust the environment. We add training wheels. We lower the seat. We offer guidance, patience, and repeated exposure. The same grace applies here. Needing support does not mean something is wrong with you. It means something is missing that would increase the likelihood of success. That said, aligned action does not come from a single solution. It comes from a set of conditions that make movement possible. These are not steps that you perform in order. What you're seeing here are a few of the most common conditions that support aligned action. Clarity of next step. The system needs to know what is immediately resolvable and not the entire outcome. Capacity-aware timing. When something is attempted matters just as much as what is attempted. Structural containment. Limits, time blocks, or boundaries can carry a task, so the system does not have to hold everything internally. Reduction of emotional load. When guilt, shame, or obligation are attached to a task, action becomes heavier than necessary. Tools, reminders, or help are not crutches. They're ways that the environment participates in the work. When the conditions are present, aligned action can happen more organically without force. I want to emphasize the goal here is not productivity, it's viability. Next, I will briefly touch upon these conditions so you can see how a small shift can change the entire experience of procrastination. Clarity of next step does not mean knowing the whole plan. It means knowing what the system can do now without escalation. When the next step is unclear, the system treats the entire task as a threat. Most people procrastinate because the system cannot identify a safe entry point. When everything feels important, complex, or overwhelming, the system will default to regulation instead of action. Clarity of the next step is not about being a project manager, a strategist, or mapping the entire sequence of events. It's about defining the very next best step, small enough to have an impact. A clear next step has edges. It has a beginning and an end that a system can perceive. Our nervous systems prefer familiar patterns. It doesn't want to reinvent the wheel every time you do something. If you've ever entered an incomplete formula in Excel and gotten an error, or watched 3 dots spin while a program struggles to load or save, this is essentially what our brain is doing. It just feels different because you're not a machine. You're a human with emotions layered on top. Asking the system to work on a project is like telling somebody to drive somewhere without an address. Of course they hesitate. The next step is the address, not the entire route. Once you know where you're starting, then you can decide where you want to avoid toll roads, take side streets, or even add waypoints. Respect current capacity, not ideal capacity. I've already covered this previously, but I want to iterate. Aligned action begins with an honest assessment of the current capacity, energy, attention, time, and emotional bandwidth. A step that fits today's capacity builds trust. A step that ignores it erodes trust, even if it gets done. Create information, not pressure. A good next step gives you feedback. It tells you, is this the right direction? Is the scope too large? Do I need support? Is something missing or misaligned? Capacity-aware timing is one of the most overlooked reasons why people believe they're procrastinating. Most people aren't avoiding tasks because they don't care. They're avoiding tasks because the timing requires more capacity than they have available. We tend to treat time as neutral, but the human system does not experience time that way. The same task can feel manageable at one point in the day and completely impossible at another, not because the task has changed, but because the capacity did. Energy, attention, emotional bandwidth, and nervous system load all fluctuate. When we ignore these fluctuations and ask for action anyway, the system has to override itself to comply. This refers back to our to-do list built on the day where the stars align. It can lead to unrealistic expectations that become the norm if we don't factor in capacity-aware timing, which asks, is this task being asked at a moment when the system can reasonably say yes? This is also where urgency creates problems. Urgency compresses times. It asks the system to do everything now regardless of readiness. When timing is misaligned, the system defaults to the preferred procrastination mode. Capacity-aware timing allows sequencing. It ties into clarity with the next step. Instead of all of this today, the system hears this piece now, the next piece later. Recovery is not something that's earned after performance. It's part of the structure that makes the performance possible. When recovery is factored in from the beginning, action becomes sustainable and less overwhelming rather than extractive. This can look like building intentional buffers into your day, time at the beginning and end to orient, regulate, and close loops. Just as most people would not plan a half marathon the day after running a full marathon, capacity-aware timing asks you to look honestly at the conditions that best support success. For example, instead of scheduling an emotionally demanding appointment, like meeting with your accountant right before tax time at the end of an already overloaded, stressful day, you might place it during a time when cognitive clarity and emotional bandwidth are higher. The task does not change, the timing does. Capacity-aware timing is how we stop treating ourselves like machines and start treating action as a partnership. Aligned action is supported when a task is placed inside a container that limits scope, time, and decision load. From this perspective, structural containment is often misunderstood as rigidity or control. In reality, it's relief. When a task has no container, the system has to hold when to start, how long it will take, how much energy it might consume, when it's done, what else it might lead to, and this is a tremendous amount of invisible labor. Without containment, the system stays alert, constantly scanning for risks, interruptions, and competing priorities. Structural containment reduces the background vigilance so action does not require constant energy. Defining time boundaries, clear start and stop points, and reduced choices removes unnecessary demands. Structural containment moves work out of the nervous system into the environment. A container answers questions before the system has had a chance to ask them. For example, I will work on this for 25 minutes. I am outlining, not finishing. Now the system knows how much is being asked, where the edges are, when there's an exit. This is especially important for people who are sensitive, intuitive, or used to being over-responsible. When there is no edges or containment, they tend to overextend automatically. Structural containment prevents that by design. This is about preventing overflow. That's why tools like timers, checklists, templates, and defined workflows help. I also like to think about structural containment the way about preparing a recipe. If you need 1 cup of flour, you don't eyeball it and hope for the best. You choose the appropriate container. Once the container is selected, very little effort is required. You scoop the flour, level it off, and pour it in. The action itself is simple, almost automatic. The work is not about scooping. The work was choosing the right container. Structural containment works the same way. When the task has a clear container, action flows because the boundaries are already doing the work. Uncertainty is what causes friction, not the task itself. Aligned action becomes possible when emotional weight is reduced before effort is increased. Reduction of emotional load is one of the most misunderstood aspects of procrastination. Many people believe they're stuck because they lack motivation. In reality, that they are carrying too much emotional weight attached to each task. The weight can be guilt for not starting sooner, shame for needing help, fear of disappointing others, pressure to do it right, or belief that progress must look a certain way. None of this is neutral. When the emotional load is high, the system treats action as risky, not because of the task itself, but because of what the task represents. This is why procrastination often comes with self-criticism. Reduction of emotional load does not mean pretending feelings are not there. It means uncoupling action from punishment. For example, you can work on something without it deciding what it says about you. You can make progress without promising perfection. When emotional penalties are removed, the system no longer has to protect itself from anticipated shame. The last topic covers how aligned action is more sustainable when support is built into the environment. Many people are taught that needing support means something's wrong, that if you're capable enough, organized, or disciplined, you won't need help. This belief is inaccurate. All complex systems rely on external support. A computer needs patches pushed to prevent vulnerabilities. A smartphone needs to have the firmware updated. Humans are no different. Environmental support does not replace responsibility. Without support, the system has to remember everything, regulate distractions, manage timing, monitor energy, anticipate obstacles. Environmental support moves some of the work out of the nervous system into the world. It might look like calendars instead of mental tracking, checklists instead of memories. Support is most effective when it's neutral. When the support carries emotional obligation, the system often avoids it, even when it would help. What we've already identified is that increased capacity is what makes aligned action repeatable. As you can see, aligned action is not created by fixing a single thing. It emerges when multiple conditions support the system at the same time. This visual matters because it shows something that most people were never taught. There is no single lever here, a master switch, or a correct order. Each of these pillars reduce pressure in a different way. None of them work alone, but they also don't need to be perfectly sequenced to interrupt procrastination, and all lend support. You can enter this system anywhere. Sometimes clarity is enough. Sometimes emotional load has to be reduced first. Sometimes the environment needs to change before anything else can happen. This is systems literacy, and it's alignment without force. Each condition reduces pressure in a different way to support the human system. Up until now, we've talked about aligned action as something that emerges from conditions, not willpower, pressure, or fixing yourself. This is where we bring this understanding inward. When I say choose your reframe, I'm not asking you to force a positive thought or mindset or override how you feel. I'm inviting you to practice responding from a different way when procrastination shows up. The first reframe is about how you meet resistance. I respond to procrastination with curiosity about support, not force. Instead of treating procrastination as a problem to eliminate, this reframe invites curiosity. Curiosity asks what support might be missing right now. The second reframe is about permission and grace. I'm allowed to build structure that supports my capacity as it is today. Many of us were taught to build our lives around what we should do on our best day. This reframe honors who you are today. It says, I do not have to exceed my capacity to be worthy of progress. You're not committing to anything by reading these statements, and you're not promising to behave differently tomorrow. You're simply practicing a different internal posture, one that replaces force with cooperation. This session is an orientation, a way to name patterns, build awareness, and create a point for you to reference that you can return to. The deeper work happens through structured tools and practices designed to help you stay with yourself under pressure in a way that respects your nervous system and your timing. If you feel ready to continue, there are many resources available at truepathco.com, including workbooks, courses, workshops, and guided practices. For those who know that they already work best through direct conversation, there's also an option to explore working with me one-on-one. All of these resources are optional, unpressured, and are offered for those who feel resonance. Choose what feels aligned, explore at your own pace, and build a life that you can truly thrive in. On Tuesdays, I share new content. This can be streamed on my Spotify channel and YouTube channel, or found on my learning portal on my website. You choose the platform that works best for you. Each session is around 30 minutes and a gentle way to stay aligned, grounded, and supported throughout the week, with a variety of topics from burnout to boundaries and many other learnings to support your human system. Your feedback shapes these sessions. I invite you to share your insight so I can build each week around what serves you most. Thank you for joining me today and being present with curiosity and awareness. I'm Tara Palazzolo of True Path CO, and until next time, let your inner compass guide you.